welcome to the conversation with myself, Paul C. House, an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. So over to you, Roger. Sort of where were you born, and how did you really sort of get it? How did you get into sort of athletics in general?
Well, I was born in Portsmouth in 1966, which means I'm 55 now. Actually, it's a good question, and I think my answer is not the answer that many people expect from somebody who is known for competing in a sport, and then obviously in my case, standing on the Olympic rostrum. The truth is, I fell into athletics. Athletics was never my dream. It was never my passion as a kid. I went to Portsmouth Grammar School, which was very academic and very structured, and you played rugby and you played cricket. So I was a rugby player at school. I was on the wing, chuck me the ball, and off you go, catch me if you can. The interesting thing about me is I was diagnosed age 11 with a leaking heart valve. So for the first few years at school, I wasn't allowed to do competitive sport, and I've never done cross country in my life. I was never been allowed to do cross country, but I was the fastest kid in school. And maybe that diagnosis, which I still have, obviously, stopped me dreaming of a career in sport. But I'd like to say that, but it wasn't. I just wasn't in the environment where sport was never an option. It was never something you did as a career. You went to the grammar school to get your O-levels, get your A-levels, go to university, become a doctor, lawyer, dentist, or whatever. Yeah. But I was fast. I was that fast kid. And this, without sounding too arrogant, I wasn't just fast. I was a lot faster than the other kids all the way through my school life. Yeah. So I did do the Hampshire Championships, and I won that invariably in 100 metres. 200 metres sometimes. I went to the English Schools Championships twice and made the final on 2 occasions, never medals or anything. In my A-level, when I was in the 6th form, I didn't go to the English Schools Championship because I was in a production of the Mikado at school. So that shows you how serious I didn't take athletics. I didn't join an athletics club. We had athletics club basically knocking on the door saying to my dad, this kid should be, training, he could be a great athlete. It wasn't my interest. It wasn't, I didn't know I was that good, if the truth be told. And I loved playing team games. I loved playing football, rugby, cricket. I was that kid who was always out until 10 o'clock at night kicking a football in the park with my mates. Yeah. So how did I get into athletics? So I got into athletics because clearly I was good. And I think I joined Fareham or Southampton Athletics Club when I was about 18, to begin with, but didn't train, but just ran for them a couple of times. The truth is I messed up my A-levels. I had to get 3 Bs to go to Bart's Hospital, St Bartholomew's Hospital, to read medicine. Okay. And I messed up my maths A-level. And I got an A in biology, I got a B in chemistry, which I was quite pleased with, and I got a D in maths, and I didn't get accepted into university. I was devastated. I remember the interesting thing is, I remember going to the pub straight after A-levels with a few mates, and they were, if you ever got to speak to any of them, they would say, at no point did we say, what are we going to be doing in 5 years' time? It never came up that I would be an athlete as a career. But because I messed up my A-level, I had to take a year off to retake my maths A-level exam about 7 or 8 months later. So I had time on my hands. And that was when my sort of best friend in the sport, who was the best high jumper in Hampshire, a guy called Alex Kahn now, it's Alex Kahn now. He's now the Olympic high jump coach. He's the jumps coach of the British Olympic team. Okay. He had more faith in me than I had in myself. And he's the one who said to me, you have no idea how good you are. Yeah. And this is where geography played its part. Because he said, I lived not far from Southampton. Mm-hmm. 2 athletes called Todd Bennett and Chris Akabusi, we heard of, had just come back from Los Angeles Olympic Games with a silver medal in their pocket from the 4x400 metre relay. And they were down in Southampton, 10 miles down the road from me. And I joined their training group. I joined their club. And the rest is history, because I basically I was a talented kid who, talent's not enough. And suddenly I had the time, and I was put in an environment of excellence. Mm-hmm. And I very quickly found out that I could catch them. And so within 2 months, I think I had my first international vest. It's ridiculous. So I'm a great example of someone who had the talent, but wasn't in the right environment to know how good he was. I am yet to meet anybody who went to the Olympic Games who wasn't given what we call the ticket to the party, the Willy Wonka golden ticket. They were given the ticket. Yeah. I'm yet to meet that person. Okay. But what I do know is clearly talent's not enough, because at the Olympic Games, everyone's been given that ticket, so everyone's good.
Yeah.
And also it depends on the sport, but certainly in my sport of running is the most natural of all sports.
Yeah. You
can line up a group of 10-year-olds and tell them to run, and you can see the kids that can run and the kids that struggle to run. Mm-hmm. Sport is unfair because it is unfair. It is unfair. Yeah. But with certain sports, other sports, not running, but certain sports, you can learn the skill of the sport. So you can become very good. You may not be a natural golfer, but if you really work hard at it, you can become good. And maybe with cricket, and maybe with snooker and darts and things like that. But with running, you get a hell of a head start if you've been given a degree of talent. And as arrogant as that may sound, it is a truth. However, talent is not enough. So the challenge is, for all of us, always was, can I fulfill my talent, whatever that talent was? Because if you look at Usain Bolt, Michael Johnson, for example, clearly, they've been given not just the ticket to the party, they've been given a golden ticket. These are extraordinary, unique talents. Yeah. But there are many talents out there who you've never heard of because they just haven't bothered to get up and go training, or they didn't have the fortune that I had to have the best training group in the country 10 miles down the road. If I lived in Scotland, honestly, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. So it's not simply how talented you are. There are lots of pieces to the puzzle. Where you live, what country, where you're born, what your situation is, whether there's a track nearby. But the most important thing of all is, who are the people you can go and run with? Yeah. Because if you want to run fast, go and run with fast people. But if you haven't got any fast people around you, you've got to go out and find them. And that's, for me, was easy because they were only 10 miles down the road. Yeah. So, I owe my career to Chris Akabusi, Todd Bennett, and all the other guys you haven't heard of. Because without having them to chase, I would never have found out how good I was.
So that's what fundamentally you see, obviously, in the US. They used to have their Santa Monica, didn't they, way back in the day? Pockets. And obviously Jamaica, I think, had the same for a while.
And what happens is you get pockets of areas, and then people travel to those areas. Why do you think Mo Farah went to America? Yeah. Why do you think, why do you think Kelly Holmes, 2 years prior to winning 2 gold medals at the Athens Olympic Games, went and trained in South Africa with Maria Matola? Yeah. She didn't look for someone in Tunbridge Wells. She got on a plane and went to find the group she needed to be with. I was just very fortunate that mine was down the road in the early days, because then it all changed because I got injured, and then it did change. But that's a very long answer to the question. But
the funny thing about that is it takes a certain mentality, though, Roger, for somebody who's, let's say, top of the tree in their country, to then go and train with maybe somebody who's slightly ahead of them on the world stage, where they've been used to being not big fish in a small pond, but somewhat close to that analogy. To then say, I'm going to go and train alongside this person, even though day in, day out for a fair amount of time, it's a hell of a mindset adjustment to go, being beaten.
But it also takes the other person to welcome that person into the group. Yeah, absolutely. Steve Backley, my business partner, went and trained with Jan Zalesny, his nemesis. Zalesny took him in, not because he thought, it doesn't matter, I'm always going to beat you, because he knew that he needed the edge to keep going. Yeah. And I just believe in life fundamentally. If you want to achieve something, you are far more likely to do it by working with other people. The decisions that I took with Chris Akabusi, big decisions in the early days. We had no money, and Daley Thompson invited us to go and train with him in California. We couldn't afford it. We went. We lived in. We rented a car for $1 a day. We lived off yogurt. We shared a room. I'm painting a picture, but it was that picture. Look, a year later, we had our own apartments. But I mean, I'm not sure I would have gone if I hadn't been with Chris. We made that decision together. Yeah. And it's a lonely life if you're trying to do everything on your own. And certainly in my sport of running, many parents will contact me and say, my child is really talented. What should they do to improve? And I only give them the same answer. It's the same answer every time. If you want to run fast, go and run with fast people.
Yeah.
And the better you become, that gets harder, because it's harder to find fast people if you're in the top few in the world. But have a group around you and stay fresh and stay on your toes. I think in all aspects of life, your self-awareness is important, and the internal dialogue, certainly as an athlete, was crucial. And knowing, you know where you want to go, but you've got to find a way to get there. And if where you want to go is on the Olympic rostrum, it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to make decisions that might not work out. I'll give you another example. So I came along and started training with Chris Akabusi in 1984, 1985. And at the same time in my event, a chap called Derek Redmond came along, and Derek Redmond and myself swapped the British record for a few years and took the 400 meters to a place it had never been before in this country. Mm-hmm. Chris Akabusi was #1 in the country in 1984 at 400 meters. He made the Olympic semi-final, he made the final, but he had the self-awareness to know that all things being equal, he couldn't beat me or Derek Redmond. But all he wanted was success. He didn't care what that vehicle was. Yeah. So what did he do? He changed events. He became a hurdler. It took him years to become a hurdler. He's now still the British record holder, Olympic bronze medalist, and he was European champion in the 400 meter hurdles. And that only happened because he had the self-awareness to know, I know I'm good, but I know I'm not as good as them. Yeah. But I want success, so I'm going to find another vehicle to do it. And people don't necessarily acknowledge how hard that is. Very few people have made that decision and been successful with it, because he had to completely reinvent his identity. He had to become a hurdler, not a 400 meter runner. The irony is, by training as a hurdler and still running with me, as a 400 meter runner, he became a faster 400 meter runner.
Which is why the relay was fantastic for you guys.
Which is why the relay was fantastic. But he would never have made the rostrum in the 400 meters ever. And he knew that.
Don't quote Chris me on this one, but I never knew that. I mean, I would imagine he obviously did the speed training over 400, but I never knew that he was actually #1 in the UK at that distance. Because when I came into watching
84.
athletics, so when I was watching athletics, my earliest memories are very loosely Ed Moses, way back, very loosely. I was very young at the time. And obviously I saw yourself coming through, and I remember bits of Derek Redmond in terms of the classic images of when he was competing, but I don't remember so much of the early years. If that makes sense. I remember Chris sort of going into the head, but I don't remember much more. So I sort of just came in as he'd already switched, on that side. And I remember with yourself, the irony, I did mention it before, the irony is one of the very first athletes I ever met was yourself, Roger, because I'm actually from Portsmouth, and I'm not sure whether it was after the Olympics. It could have been after you went to the Olympics. I think you popped into an appearance at my. So I'm from Waterloo originally, and you popped in and said hi, and I said to my wife the other day, I said, speaking with Roger, I said, the irony of this, it's almost coming full circle for me. The very first person I've ever spoken to as a kid was obviously yourself. But it's I just remember that period very well, because I was following your career a lot.
Well, I was always on the back page, on the front page of the Portsmouth Evening News. So if you live down there, you couldn't avoid me.
Well, you were our superstar, Roger. You're on that front. But the funny thing is that I remember that period where obviously for me, you were like the superstar in our area and in the UK, but I also remember it well because, I'm in touch with people like Butch Reynolds as well. So I remember sort of Butch Reynolds. The people that you were competing about over the entire career that you were racing are basically the biggest icons of that distance, essentially, probably ever, including now. When you think sort of Butch Reynolds and you think Michael Johnson, especially over the 400s.
I picked the wrong time, eh?
Well, the funny thing is I was speaking with a Man United football player, and he came through, and he was up against Ryan Giggs and David Beckham and those people. And I was saying, do you know what? History looks back kindly in a way in which sometimes comparisons can be used as criticisms, because you're not as good as what they are. But when time goes on, people look back and a little bit more fondly and say, do you know what, though? It's a hell of an achievement.
It's true. And actually, the best thing about getting old the best thing about getting old is that the older you become, the better you become in people's minds. And they don't forget the details, but if they remember you, then they remember you better than you probably were. Yeah, but I have to say the 400 meters at the moment, I mean, maybe not. It's pretty hot. It's pretty hot. People just don't know the people involved because the sport doesn't get the coverage it used to get. So, the names you threw out there, we were on telly, during the summer, there was something on every week, so you would know those names. Now, really, it's the Olympics or the World Championships, and that's about it. So,
and from coming back, obviously, to you got into into the training. You're fully focused on that. You're training with people like Chris and Todd Bennett, at that time, and obviously going over to the States, with Daley over there, as well.
Sorry,
no, that's all right. Obviously, you're aware how quick you are at that point. I'm trying to remember going into your sort of first World Championship or first Olympics. Did you have an eye on in terms of what your expectations were going into that first sort of major? I know you've got British Championships, etc. as well, but what was your expectations going into your first major one?
The beauty of athletics is you have a pretty good idea where you are and who you're going to be up against when you go into the championships. Mm-hmm. So my first Olympics was terrible because I was carrying an injury, you just know that you're not on it. My second Olympics in Atlanta was fantastic because I was in great shape and the times had shown me that. So I went into it in the top 2-3 in the world. So, and I knew, with the exception of Michael Johnson, that on my day I had beaten and could beat anyone else in the world. Yeah. Whereas Barcelona, I didn't make the Olympic final in Barcelona because I was carrying an injury. And that's the truth. In our game, if you're fit and you're healthy and you've had a good run in, you're going to probably do okay. Yeah. And come back to Kelly Holmes. She was always niggled. She always had injuries, and so she always sort of did okay, but never brilliantly at the championships. With Nick a bronze, Nick a silver. Why did she win 2 Olympic gold medals in 2004? Many reasons, but she would probably agree the main reason is she had a run of about 4 or 5 months of health. It's a Wednesday. She had a run of good health, and she, that is, for an athlete, is everything, because you very rarely have that luxury. Yeah. The first year of my athletic career, and then the second year where I won the Europeans and the Commonwealth Championships, there wasn't a lot of skill involved in it. The fact was I was healthy. Yeah. And if you're healthy, you're going to do okay. The rest of my career was one long, hard slog. Literally every year battling with injury. Honestly, just no fun. But to answer your question, but you know where you stand. You have an idea where you stand, and then if you're prepared mentally for the championships, you get ready for battle. But it's a lot easier when you're healthy. Those
injuries, and you sort of see it with a lot of athletes, don't you? When it's almost the first injury, then triggers everything else off. Like everything's going smoothly, they're running amazingly quick, and then whatever the injury is, was it the same recurring injury for yourself, or was it one that then triggered off others?
Look, I didn't touch my toes until I was 18. I was, rugby player, whatever. So my body, you go straight into, this Olympic training group. You're going to get found out. Your body can only take so much. Yeah. But it's very rare that somebody has an injury-free career. Yeah. Look, you just learn. What was so easy, it can never be easy again. You have to find different ways. You have to respect your body. You have to think a bit. You have to work it out. But it's without doubt the worst part of being in sport, because you can have all the best plans in the world, but if you have a serious injury, you can forget it. The challenge is coming back, and that's why very few.
And what is the mindset for yourself? Because obviously, let's just say you're geared up for nearly 4 years, obviously, for the Olympics. Yeah. And it's an incredible disappointment, isn't it? Not many people gear up 4 years to achieve sort of one thing, and then.
Well, spare a thought for those athletes, those older athletes, who were getting ready and were in great shape in 2019. Yeah. Ready for the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. That now gets postponed, and as we sit here today, the Olympics are starting in a few weeks' time. They're gone because they couldn't hold on another year. Yeah, the younger ones are going great because another year is a long time. it was awful. It was awful dealing with it. But what sport gives you is you have a choice. You can either dwell on the past, or you can switch and focus on the future. And what most sports people, well, all sports people are wired to do, is to face up to the moment, but to switch towards the future. And we were programmed like that. And there's always another competition. There's always another race. There's always another chance. And that hope is so important, because it gives you something to go for. If you didn't have something clear to go for, and okay, yes, if you mess up an Olympics, you have to wait 4 years. But I've got 2 dogs now playing here. If you mess up an Olympics, you have to wait 4 years. But in between those 4 years, there is a European Championships. There's a 2 World Championships now. Yeah. So there's always something, and that is the thing that keeps you going.
Okay. So you basically shifting the goal. So if
shifting all the time, you're shifting all the time, because you
rather than being consumed by that sort of huge disappointment, your mind's straight onto the next.
Well, you accept the huge disappointment. You accept the loss of the loss of income. You accept the hours and hours of physio and doctors and all that, and the pain and so. But you can deal with all of that if you have something to aim for.
Yeah.
And the beauty of sport is it gave you not just something to aim for. You knew the day, the time, the place of the Olympic final.
Yeah.
Well, prior to COVID, but normal year. You even knew that it was on July the whatever in Atlanta on that day, and it wasn't going to move for you, and it wasn't going to wait for you. So you could start planning way back.
Yeah.
And that clarity which sport gave you is the thing that you miss the most in retirement.
Okay.
Because life can never be as clear.
One thing I always used to remember when you were on the starting line is you had incredible focus. You could see it. I mean, most of the time they all look focused. Well, some people, look a little bit more focused than others. If that makes sense. And you look like you had laser focus. When you're on the starting line.
Everyone puts themselves in what they think is the optimum state for performance. So Usain Bolt is giving it a bit of that and giving it a bit of that. But for him, that is how he gets ready.
Yeah.
By the way, for the second before, he's very focused. But leading up to that second before, he's giving it all that. You have to know yourself. And I was always battling with nerves. I was always battling with a degree of anxiety, which I think you all have. But what I was able to do was find that way to center myself and come into myself, because and that would have been reflected in how I was looking, which meant I really was in my zone. I was in my world. Because in the 400 meters, you have to be careful, because you are influenced by everyone around you, but they're in different lanes and different places. And you need to really focus on running your own race, because it can go horribly wrong. And it did go horribly wrong for me on many occasions. But being focused, getting yourself into that optimal state is something you kind of work out as the years go by.
So it's really the experience, isn't it? The more experience,
I guess so.
The more you become comfortable and knowledgeable. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I always look at when I watch sport in general is the strategy, technique, and relaxation. And a lot of people always say, he's running too tense, or he has a certain specific strategy, or he's lost his stride rhythm. I've never been in that position, so but I can understand how you're too tense. Everything. All your muscles are. You're not going to run as fast, but it's not easy to run relaxed, is it? When you're in a big situation, it's easier said than done. So how do you do that, or did you find yourself running more relaxed and sometimes more than others?
I look back on my career and the best. I had 2 very good years. I would say really good years. One was 1986, when I was young, fit, healthy, naive, and it was all new, and I just ran. Didn't think of anything. I ran too quickly, would hit the wall, but I never really thought about it. I just ran, and I broke the British record and won the European and Commonwealth Games by doing that. Okay. You then got to go forward 10 years until my next best year ever, which was 1996 at the Olympic Games. I ran around the same times as I did in 86, but I ran the race completely differently.
Yeah.
But, you know, for me, my challenge was always not tying up at the end. I did have a tendency with 50 meters to go to lose my form and to get all tight and whatever. And I learned to make the race easy. Actually, I learned to section the race much more evenly, and to have the confidence to run very relaxed for as long as possible. And although that sounds easy, it's a very hard thing to do in the Olympic final, especially when you've got Michael Johnson outside you with gold shoes, who's going to go off, who's going to do stuff between 200 meters and 300 meters that no one else in the world can do, because he's the world record holder over 200 meters, so I can't do that. So staying relaxed is such a challenge, and the great athletes have this ability to look so relaxed and yet run very quickly. I was okay for the first 300, 350 meters, but I always struggled at the end. And I won't go into the detail, but I worked it out. I worked out how to, I would look tight, but if you analyze it, I wasn't actually tight where it mattered. But it is a challenge. It's different in different distances. Yes, it is. Yeah. The distance races, there's more of a battle. But in a single lane race like the 400 meters or the 100 meters or the 200 meters, you really are focusing on running your race, and because you know that you're going to react to what's going on around you just by being in the race. Yeah. But there's reacting and there's reacting, and the key is to absolutely stay in control of what you're doing and to not react, but know that you are reacting just subconsciously. And it was the hardest thing to do. It's the Olympic final, because the stakes are so high. You stand by the line. If you're thinking, well, if I get a medal here, life's going to be great. And if I mess up, it's not so great. You just can't be thinking that. You just can't. And you can't second guess Michael Johnson. And we all talk about Michael Johnson, but there were 3 other guys in that race who had all run faster than me on time at some point in the year, and on their day were all capable of beating me. So it wasn't just trying to beat Michael Johnson, which wasn't the case, obviously. It was also a case of staying ahead of them. Yeah. If you start thinking about all these variables, it's all over. So you just have to simplify it, and actually almost, it's a slightly out of body experience when you do that, because you almost hand over to your subconscious. You almost hand over to instinct. And I certainly did that in the Olympic final. I remember consciously just waiting for the gun to go, and as soon as that gun went, it was instinct. It was as if I'd done it hundreds of times before anyway, because I'd rehearsed it in my mind and whatever. But you haven't got time to think. You just have to instinctively do what you've prepared to do.
But it's a great level of discipline, though, Roger, because I've seen plenty, like you said, I've seen plenty of athletes incredibly gifted come to the line, and they either try and compete with somebody they either really can't do, and they end up not getting a medal at all, and really fall completely away trying to compete with something that was at no point probably in training would they've even got anywhere near the time of that person that was going to win that. And it's almost, from a human nature perspective, you say it's a natural instinct to just compete, isn't it? And they just can't accept not competing. But then the other part of it is it's almost irrational to be chasing a Ferrari when you don't have that,
And that was in many ways the analogy of me against Michael Johnson, well, not just me, the rest of the world against Michael Johnson in '96 in the 400 meters. But and I've been quoted and misquoted, whatever, on this, famously quoted that we're all running for silver medal. Yeah, I think there's a degree of truth in that. But you've got to understand the mindset. I never went into those Olympic Games thinking there was no way I could win the gold medal. Yeah. But I knew that for me to win the gold medal, 2 things had to happen. One, I had to run the best race of my life, because the rest of the world was just too good, especially Michael Johnson. Yeah. And secondly, other people had to not run the best race of their lives, including Michael Johnson. Because Michael Johnson, don't forget, in Barcelona in 1992, got food poisoning. Yeah. So he didn't compete, right? Now, he could have got food poisoning in Atlanta. He could, Butch Reynolds, who you mentioned earlier, pulled a hamstring in 1996. So stuff happens, and all you can do as an athlete is make it as likely as possible that you run as fast as you possibly can. but you cannot control the rest of the field.
Yeah.
And so all things being equal, Michael Johnson's going to win the gold medal. And of course, that's what happened.
Yeah.
But as we see all the time in sport, it doesn't always work out like that.
Absolutely.
So I never went into the Olympics thinking there's no way I can win a gold medal. But I certainly didn't waste any time going into the Olympics saying I'm going to beat Michael Johnson, because I hadn't beaten him for 6 years. So why is that going to change? Well, because if I tried to beat Michael Johnson, I would never have won a medal.
But the great thing you touched on there was the variables, and that pretty much applies to everything in life. You know, you can only, you know, whether it's business or sport, that you can only control yourself, essentially. You know, and I find it in business, you know, over the last 20 years, look, I can do the greatest pitch, you know, and I can walk out and feel I've done the greatest pitch ever. And equally, some days you win it in the business and some days you won't. I won't necessarily feel like it's been a great success if I haven't won it, but equally I don't walk away and actually say, well, that was a failure either. You know, so it's one of those where sometimes I can walk away and go, actually, do you know what, that was a good job. It wasn't what I was there necessarily for. You know, it's different in the business sort of analogy, but it wasn't what I was necessarily there for. But equally, I'm not walking away saying, you know, that was an abject failure. You know, I tend to take away the things that I can learn from those sort of moments and maybe look at who I've lost, that opportunity to, and maybe have I don't wallow in it, but I'll take a 5 minutes and say, okay, almost reverse engineer what they did, and then look and reverse engineer what I did, and say, okay, there's things to learn to move forward. We'll move forward onto the next opportunity. And like you said, there's way too many variables in life to be constantly, you know, thinking that you can control it.
You learn to control the controllables, and you hope your opponents mess up. But but it's true, and it's obvious, and it's easy to say. I tell you what, it's quite hard to do. It's quite hard to do because of emotions, because you get caught up. You get caught up in emotions, and all I would say is, you know, in some ways it was easier for me going into '96 against someone like Michael Johnson, because it wasn't like one day I beat him, next day he beat me. Like if you had Cohen Ovett in the '80s or whatever, you know, it was a bit, it wasn't that situation, and maybe that determines a different mindset. Ultimately, all you can do is choose the right mindset that you believe is the right mindset for you to do the best you possibly can.
And moving over to the relay, Roger, because obviously you're famous, you know, for the relay as well. You know, obviously a fantastic period, you know, in terms of relay running that we had. You know, we have so many great people. I mean, I remember even John Regis coming up from the 200 to an amazing 400, which, you know, sort of used to blow people's minds. I think, well, I'm trying to go that far back, thinking I even had hair at that point, Roger. You know, but you sort of sit there and think, wow, because from what I remember, you used to have America's 400, which was just, obviously you'd have Michael Johnson, it was almost like world record holder, former world record holder, past gold medalist. It was almost ridiculous. It was almost like a basketball's all-star 400.
But they always won because their pool of talent was far greater than it. I mean, many countries can't put four runners together. So you're patching together a team to get four together. The Americans could pick, you know, they would usually have 6 of the top 10 in the world to pick from. So hence why they always won.
But it's phenomenal what you did, though, Roger. Absolutely phenomenal, wasn't it? I mean, in athletics terms, it's very rare in athletics that you say the relay. You know, when people look back on iconic moments, and obviously we go over in the UK.
Yes, you're referring to the World Championships in 1991, where myself, Derek Redmond, John Regis, and Chris Akabusi won the gold medal. It's an amazing race. It's an amazing story. I mean, it's, if you had to write a script, that's the script you would write, you know, because we on paper should have come second, maybe third. We pulled in a guy from the 200 meters in John Regis to do a job. We had a 400 meter hurdler in Chris Akabusi in the team. But we had 4 experienced athletes who had been around a long time, and we did something different. It's as simple as that. We changed the running order. So I was going to go last as normal, as the fastest athlete. So I won a silver in the individual. And I went on the first leg, and it changed the race, because by going on the first leg, we were in the lead on the second lap.
Yeah.
And invariably, the Americans would always go from the front. They'd always be in the lead, and off they go because there's nothing to worry about. You just run. So what we did was we made them react to us and to be aware of us. And look, I haven't got time to go into the details of it, but it was that moment. It was a moment in time where we had an opportunity to win, and we took it because you had 4 athletes who were all healthy, were all experienced, but more importantly, all 4 of us were very clear of the roles that each 4 of us had to do, and there were 4 very specific roles. And quite simply, the first 3 of us had to give Chris Akabusi the baton right behind the American. Simple as that. Chris knew he could beat the American because the American Antonio Pettigrew had beaten me by a couple of hundredths of a second because I messed up the World Championship final. I should have won it. So Chris knew in training that now and again he could get past me if he ran behind me. So he was full of confidence. But it's an amazing race. We often get to talk about it. We often get to show it. And it's a race that many, many people remember. And we're very lucky to have had it.
Who put that strategy together? Because obviously
myself and Chris.
Yeah.
Myself and Chris. Yeah. So Chris and I room together all the time. The decision had been made that by the team management that Derek was to go first, Chris was going to go second, John was going to go third, and I was going to go last. We then went to bed that night. We talked about it. We agonized about it. We knew that wasn't going to win. We knew that we had to be in the lead after the first lap. So we knew I had to go first. And we had to reverse it. So what we actually did was we reversed. So the fastest runner went first. The second fastest runner went second. The third fastest runner went third. And then, keep your fingers crossed. And but we also knew that Chris was the most experienced relay runner in the world. And we also knew that relays are not the same as individual races. And no matter who you are, if you've got someone breathing down your neck, you're aware of them. Now, don't get us wrong. If Michael Johnston had been running the last lap, and by the way, they didn't put him in the team because they thought they could win without him, it might have been a different outcome.
Yeah.
But it was a massive deal because we challenged convention, the lessons from it. We changed the winning formula. We did it as a team. It wasn't the team management. It was us that did it. So what do we do by doing that? We took ownership for our destiny, something that most athletes don't do. They get told what to do and they don't question it. Well, we were older. But we were experienced and we'd been around for years. We weren't kids who was going to be told what to do. We were adults who could work it out as a group.
You took control of that situation.
Yeah, and it's a lovely analogy. And I've spent many years getting paid to talk about it at conferences. Not as much as Chris, but the thing is, at the time it was just a race. But I now know, obviously, it's much more than the race.
Absolutely.
But just to be slightly sentimental about it, the best bit about that race is that myself, John, and Derek, and Chris are closer friends now than we were back then. I mean, regularly play golf together, regularly WhatsApp, regularly.
Yeah.
My Chris and I will always be. We were best friends and all that, and still are. But I mean, the 4 of us have a shared experience that has in many ways defined our lives. And the lovely thing about it is we can share it together.
Yeah.
Because when you stand on a rostrum on your own, this is the funny bit. There's only one other person I can share that with, and I do share it with him on the very, very, very few times that I see him, because I don't work for the BBC anymore. Yeah. And that, of course, is Michael Johnston. So when Michael Johnston and I are in the room together, because we stood on that rostrum together, we are very close and we have a shared experience.
Yeah.
With the 3 other chaps in the relay, I have that most days of my life.
You get that team experience.
That is the beauty, and that is the beauty of teamwork.
Well, you mean, and a lot of people across life and business, that relay touches upon strategy, it touches upon heart, it touches upon psychology, and the team. I mean, it's almost everything that as you're obviously an entrepreneur now, but you're always trying to build a culture of teamwork and various things to grow anything in business. And what you did there, and that's why it's so revered. It isn't just the win; it's all the elements of how it happened. Absolutely. Is why it's revered so much. We've had plenty of wins over the years in various sports, but it's it's all those pieces of the puzzle and how it happens and who you beat, and you know that's really why it's remembered. But I know the audience would really love to know what's life been like for Roger, you know,
Well,
since the athletics.
It's been different. You know, you retire and what do you do? And I was very fortunate in retirement that I worked for a few years with the BBC. But my passion was corporate speaking, following with Chris Akabisi. And then prior to the 2012 Olympic Games, because you know, I was doing okay, but I didn't have that clarity. Steve Backley, the great javelin thrower, 3 times Olympic medalist, you know, mate of mine, but not someone who it wasn't my best mate in the sport, but you know, he was a thrower, for goodness sake. Runners don't mix with throwers. We met up for a beer, and you know, that was 15 years ago. And we've been in business together 15 years. Our business is Backley Black. His passion is property. So we have a property brand that he absolutely, you know, loves, and we help people who want to get involved in property, but we do a lot of corporate work. We have a product called Mind Setting, which is just sharing the lessons we learned, the stuff I've talked about today in sport that we've translated into the workplace. But the most current thing I'm doing is taking, I've had a fitness brand for 15 years, Roger Black Fitness, selling bikes and treadmills and cross trainers and rowers through Argos, through a licensing deal with Argos. But over the last year, but now since we've gone live in the last few weeks, I'm now, you know, I own the brand. I've always owned the brand, but now I'm actually, you know, running it myself, direct to consumer, rogerblackfitness.com. And it's been lovely connecting with customers, something I wasn't really able to do when it was under license with Argos, and just building a business, you know, being a startup, but an established successful brand, but it's still a startup, and the challenges that you face with that. So I'm hands-on. So I'm quite busy building a new business, an existing business, but now running it myself. And as you say, with teamwork, you know, trying to work with the right people, putting a team together. Yeah, the analogies are all there, but also, you know, the stuff that has to get done.
And in terms of, I mean, obviously to come back sort of full circle, really, you know, in terms of fitness, do you still do any form of running, or do you still sort of keep?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it's the most asked question I get. And the answer is very straightforward. When I stopped athletics, I stopped physically. I was broken, but also without that goal of trying to win Olympic medals, I just kicked a football, hit a tennis ball, and just enjoyed myself. Yeah. As I've got older, being fit has become really important to me, especially with my heart. And it's not fit, it's just moving. And this is what I do to do that at 55. And people might think, you know, I'm down the gym pumping weights, and I'm not that person. But what I do is this. I build it into the routine of my day. My wife, fortunately, you know, insists on running. She's very important for her just to clear her head and mentally as well. So we take the kids to school, and then we go for about 30-minute jog in the woods. And it really is, you know, it's a jog in the woods. Okay. Yeah. But we do that 6 days a week. And the key to it all is doing a little bit regularly. It's not going down the gym once every 4 days and hitting it and aching for the next 3 days. Yeah. It's just doing it easy. And then later on in the day, of course, I'll go on my Roger Black rower or my Roger Black treadmill or whatever, but on my bike. Actually, I do, actually. But I mix it up. I like to swim a little bit, but I don't push it anymore. And one of the reasons I don't push it is I have to respect my heart now, because as I get older, and it's fine, but I love to keep moving. So for me, my fitness thing is about keeping moving, but I'm not pushing it. So that's what I do.
So just lastly, in terms of your, you know, and I didn't really go mention too much, in terms of your heart, did that actually impact you?
Oh, yeah.
It did. How much? I mean, obviously it's very hard to put a percentage on it, but how much?
No, it didn't. It didn't impact me physically.
Okay.
So from the age of 11, for every year of my life, I go to Southampton General Hospital, and I saw a specialist. Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, it's now every year, every 2 years now, but all the way through my career, every year I went down. I'm on my 4th consultant. Okay. I've been doing it for what, 44 years.
Yeah.
And every day I went down there, I didn't know how it was, you know, what was going to happen. You go in, you get all the tests done, and I didn't know what they were going to say. my heart has been monitored every year of my life for the last 44 years. I'm very fortunate in that respect because I have an incompetent heart valve. Clearly, it didn't affect me as an athlete. There was one scare. It was a false alarm, but I had to spend a week in hospital. But, you know, it's a really weird thing to talk about, but it's true. You know, I mean, my diagnosis is I have chronic heart disease. That doesn't add up. Okay, I would sit in the waiting room with people who are clearly really struggling, and they have the same problem as me. For whatever reason, my valve has been fine. I blocked it out as an athlete. My father worried every day about it. Chris Akabusi knew about it. We never talked about it. I didn't want it to be an excuse because it didn't make sense that I could do what I did.
Yeah.
But then when you see things like Christian Eriksen and the European football, you realise you have to respect it. Now, the thing for me is that my heart has been monitored for 44 years. So they're going to pick it up, you would hope. So exercise for me has now become more about respecting my heart. But clearly it hasn't been a problem for me. It's a weird one. It's a very weird one. Logically, I should not have been able to do what I did, but I did.
But you know what, though, Roger, it inspires people in general, not necessarily because there'll be something that won't be monitored every single day, you know, won't be in that position. And so it's not to say because Roger could do it, that means you can also be an athlete. They wouldn't necessarily have that there, you know, and it would maybe be unsafe for them to try and push themselves that much. And it's like, you know, obviously everyone's individual circumstances are different. But when I was speaking with Gary Hall, he has type 1 diabetes. He got diagnosed I think it was 24, and I was talking to him about that element. How did he cope with sort of the world coming crashing down in terms of you're an Olympic athlete, you're not meant to be, you know, you're sort of seen as superhuman, you know, on so many different levels. How do you cope with it anyway? Putting athletics aside, how do you just cope with the day to day, let alone? But then how do you cope with it? Then managing your ambition, like you say, you know, and it takes an unbelievable amount of mental strength.
Yeah, but I think what you do as an athlete, is you recognize the situation and then you push forward.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I don't want to glorify it because it wasn't. I throughout my career, I honestly put it to the back of my mind because I didn't want it to be an excuse. But that in itself is an interesting strategy, because that's a strategy of somebody who is so focused on where they're going that actually I haven't got time to think about something else that isn't going to help me get there.
Yeah.
Now, you know, without the monitoring and the wrong condition, that can kill you.
Yeah.
if you But in my case, it wasn't that situation. You know, my condition was such that you know, it wasn't going to kill me. It was you know, something that might have stopped me, but you know, it wasn't something I gave much thought to when I was running. I really didn't.
So obviously the Olympics is coming up, Roger. I think it's still on. Fingers crossed. Unless anything else happens, I think it's going to happen.
It's on. Too late to stop it now.
Will you be still glued to the TV? Are you doing any commentary?
I'm not got anything officially that I'm doing. I might get called up by the odd channel if there's a drug story or something like that. I'll be watching it with my kids, you know, which is lovely. You know, my boys are 15 now, twin boys, and they were lucky enough to go to the 2012 Olympics when they were 6. You know, but they love watching it, you know, and we watch it as a family. So I watch it as a spectator and enjoy it. And then look at the British 400 metre runners and go, wow, in my day, you know. Well, no, actually, there aren't any British 400 men. None of them are qualified, so there won't be any male British 400 metre runners at the Olympics, which is incredible. So yeah, well, in my day, of course, we were winning medals, but you got to be really careful not to become that. I was chatting the other day with Ewan Thomas and Mark Richardson and Jamie Bolch, who also we won a gold medal retrospectively at the World Championships, and actually still hold the British record. We won silver in Atlanta, and we were chatting about that, and we all realised that we mustn't get into that. Well, in my day, you know, we were doing. But the truth is, you know what? We were pretty good back then. We were pretty good back then, and you know what, Roger, we were fighting each other all the time. And I mean,
and I think, you know, sometimes, you know, I was saying, you know, comparison can be the thief of all joy sometimes in life in general. and it's
The
very,
thief
very
of all
true.
joy.
If you spend your life constantly comparing yourself to somebody else, then you won't enjoy the moments that you're in. And I think that athletics, you know, we've gone through various incarnations of golden periods, if that makes sense. And it depends what element of sport you're looking at, you know, and what is perceived as a golden era.
That's the point. A golden era in athletics is not defined by a few individuals winning gold medals. Mo Farah has won many Olympic gold medals and whatever over the last few years. But you can't call it a golden era for British athletics. You can call it a golden era for Mo Farah.
Yeah.
But you can't call it for gold. The reason the area that I came into and then lived through was golden is because it wasn't one or two individuals winning medals every time. You would switch on the television set, and as you just said, you'd have Linford Christie in the 100 meters, Colin Jackson in the hurdles, you'd have John Regis in the 200 meters, you'd have me or whoever in the 400 meters, you'd have Seb Coe as he was coming towards the end of his career, or Steve Cram, Peter Elliott, you'd have Steve Batley throwing the javelin, you had Jonathan Edwards doing the triple jump, you'd have Denise Lewis, you'd have Sally Gunnell, you have Chris Akabusi. At nearly every event there was somebody fighting for medals. That's why it was a golden period, because it wasn't just around one or two people, it was around this collective and you don't see that now. You see, you know, Dina Asher Smith is an incredible talented, and so is Katarina Johnson Thompson. There are a few, you know, distance runners who you haven't heard of, who you're going to hear of, you know, hopefully in Tokyo, but it's not going to be the depth that we would have had back in our day, and that's why it was a golden period. And I'm so lucky to have been part of it. You know?
Do you put that down to anything in particular?
I think you can analyze it, and I'm not the best person to do that. I don't live in the grassroots level of the sport. You know, talent is being competed for by other sports. So if you're a talented kid, football and rugby and cricket, you know, cricket and rugby are now professional careers. Athletics, you want to make money in sport, don't do athletics, because the odds are against you. You have to be an Olympic medalist to make a good living. Go to football, rugby, cricket. I don't know about tennis, or you know, about golf. You know, you don't even have to be the best. You don't even have to be an international footballer to make a hell of a lot of money. So if you're a talented kid, you know, you've got choices, you probably wouldn't choose athletics unless it's your, you know, and I'm just being honest, that's how it is. But there are lots of other reasons for it. But you know, it is a concern. And also athletics is a sport where you train for sort of 8 months of the year to compete for 2 or 3. You know, that's tough, isn't it? You know, that's in a world of instant gratification, that's tough. So there are lots and lots and lots of reasons. But then again, you would say that's the same for every country in the world. So and also events have their ebb and flow, and you know, there's no rhyme and reason to it. We were just fortunate at that moment in time to have a group of athletes from multiple events, all capable of winning global medals. And we may never see that again.
It's tough because you, as an audience, when somebody who's coming, so let's just say if you look at the javelin, for instance, where it feels like forever since it was obviously Steve Batley. So whoever comes through, and it's not any slight on whoever's coming up in that area, everybody's automatic sort of reaction. You know, in fairness, the media do put it out there, but we all go straight back to Steve Batley breaking a world record or medals. And then so the expectations on the poor person coming up is and it's a tough one, because I'm one of these people that I tend to say, well, don't lower the standard. It's for them to reach that standard. It should inspire them, not demoralize them. But equally, it's an unbelievable amount of pressure for somebody to be shooting for the moon. And it's that balance act, isn't it? You want to inspire them, but don't give them.
The other thing is, you know, we started the conversation with talking about talent. And the truth is, talent you're born with. You can't create talent. You may have a latent talent, you never know how good you are. And I'm an example of that. Okay. So what we do know is the starting point with kids born in this country is that you know, you don't stop having the talent. But what we know, and maybe the answer to the question is why it's not happening now, is that the path to go from talent to Olympic rostrum now is much harder to navigate than it did maybe in my day, because there are so many more distractions.
Yeah.
You know, my day, you couldn't get me inside. There was nothing to do. Nowadays, I can't get my kids outside.
No,
So I know,
right.
and I know that's the same. And I know that's the same for everyone in the world.
Yeah.
But you know, that automatically eliminates an enormous amount of talented kids, because if they're not going to go outside, they're never going to find out how fast they are.
Yeah.
So I suppose the thing is, I would say, is going to be harder for lots and lots of people to perform at a high level in British athletics again, but you're always going to get the individuals. You're always going to get one or two or maybe three who are going to deliver. Will we ever get back to 10, 12 people, 15 people capable of winning medals? I don't know. But you can understand why it has become harder.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I tend to think that the place to start is at schools, but equally, like you said, kids are at school, they're looking at the sports that are professionalised, where the money, the career is, human nature on that side. Then they've got the gaming element that used to, play a computer game 20 years ago, just playing a computer game. Play a computer game now, you've got a career in it. And everything that we're all taught at school 30 years ago, that wasn't a career. And if you talked about it, you're probably in detention. Now it's a career, so the irony of everything's completely flipped on its head in the last 40 years.
Yeah. Last weekend was the British Olympic trials. It wasn't on telly. They didn't show it. Now, Mo Farah was there and Dean Asher-Smith was there.
Yeah.
It wasn't on telly. It was on YouTube. And you'd have to be an avid athletics fan to know it was on YouTube and to find it. In 1996, I won the 400 meters in the British Olympic trials, where 5 athletes went under 45 seconds to a full house in Birmingham. And it was back page, and I think for the odd paper, front page news the next morning. But, it was on BBC. This is the, so it's tough. Athletics is fighting to compete with other sports, and it's losing.
And I think the hard bit is what comes first. The TV companies to actually put it out there, or the stars to actually get the attention of the TV companies. And obviously, the problem that you have is obviously you've come through, like you say, like this period with Mo Farah and his dominance, and obviously he's probably coming towards the end. I don't think
no probably about it.
Yeah.
Qualify for the Olympics. So
precisely. So so you look at it and say, well, look, that's the last of that sort of period. From 2012, sort of onwards. Not obviously we've got Dean Asher-Smith and other ones that are coming through.
Others,
we
could have a good.
Yeah, and I just think we've gone through a real period, especially with Olympic athletes in general, a real sort of 30-year cycle where from cycling to rowing to boxing to the track and field to swimming pool. The irony is swimming arguably is probably the best it's ever been, without competing and people like that.
And that's right. And therefore we shouldn't necessarily generalize here. And maybe athletics is just going through a certain cycle, and it's not terrible. It's just, and the rest of the world is caught up, you could argue, and who knows?
Well,
I don't know.
Is there anyone that you're going to be looking out for at the Olympics? Before we'll end on that one for you, Rogers. Anyone that you're going to be specifically looking out for?
I mean, from a British perspective, I'll just pick up on the one person, and I know it's the obvious one, Dean Asher-Smith, because I just think she's wonderful, and I just think it's going to be a real test for her, because she's going into these Olympics in great shape, but the rest of the world is running faster.
Yeah.
And what I love about that statement is that doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to beat her in the Olympic Games, because you can run fast at certain times a year, but all that matters as an athlete is what you do in the Olympic final when that gun goes. And that's pure athletics. And I think she has always delivered when it matters at championships. So to see her hopefully deliver against people who will probably have had faster times behind them, I would love to see that. So that's the thing I'm most excited about. And in my event, the men's 400 meters, there's some very talented athletes from all over the world. It'd be interesting to see how the world record holder Van Niekerk of South Africa, who's been injured, he injured himself in playing in a charity rugby match. What was he thinking 2 or 3 years ago and hasn't run properly since? I'd love to see him come back. but I fear he won't. But I'd love to see him come back.
And in terms of Dina Asher-Smith, is she better at the 100 or the 200?
She's better at 200.
So you would say the two. So is it Alison Felix? Is that right on there?
No, there's some new. I should know, but there's some new. There's a new young female athlete in America who's been posting some pretty amazing times. And still the Jamaicans are pretty amazing times. But yeah, Dina's best event is the 200 meters, not the 100 meters. She's world champion in the 200 meters.
Fantastic. Well, Roger, thank you so much for today. I know I've kept you forever and a day. You know, I'm sure there'll be.
Sorry about my dogs fighting througut the whole thing, or playing.
No, that's okay. Well,
playing throughout the whole thing.
Well, if you need me to come round and walk them for you afterwards, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Roger.
They get
well,
run
yeah,
every
thanks
day.
so much for today, Roger.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Roger.